Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about council tax. Now, as a Canadian living in the UK, council tax was something that I was not familiar with at all, but it's actually pretty important. So what is council tax? Well, as the name suggests, it is a tax that goes towards your local council. So this is money that is used for like rubbish collection or lighting or streets or all of that kind of local stuff in your community. Now, I don't think it's super important to understand the intricacies of how the council decides on your particular tax amount, but the general idea is that homes are put into a band. Each band pays a certain amount, and typically the larger the home, the more council tax you'll be expected to pay. How much council tax are you expected to pay? So this is going to depend on the property you are currently in. As an expat, I have lived in the UK for 7 years now, and I have lived in a variety of different types of homes and flats, some better than others, but all of them have had their own council tax amount. So what you can do is you can go onto the Gov website. All of the relevant links are going to be in the video description. You can go onto a particular website and search for your property to see how much you pay. You should also receive a bill from your council that will have the amount in writing. Now, it's important to remember that while we are talking about the UK, there are multiple countries within that. So my experience is with England. England is slightly different to Scotland, which is slightly different to Northern Ireland, which is slightly different to Wales. So I will put all the links in the description. Some of the words are slightly different, but the general idea is the same among all the countries. Now, who has to pay council tax? This is actually kind of confusing, and there's a lot of regulations set about in this. Who has to pay? The idea is that there needs to be a liable person and a structure of like hierarchy to determine who is responsible to pay this tax. The idea being, if the tax is not paid, the council has to have a very clear idea of who is responsible and who they will then need to pursue. For the regular everyday person, here's the general idea. If you are by yourself, you are liable. If you are with a partner, whether that is a like common law, marriage, civil partnership, dating, whatever, both of you are liable together and also separately. The idea being is you couldn't say, oh, well, my partner was taking care of council tax and they must have forgotten. That's not a good enough excuse because you are both liable for that tax. That doesn't mean you both pay the tax individually, but together as the household, you are responsible to make sure that payment is made. Now, one instance where this might be a little bit weird, and definitely any people watching who are probably going to live in London, or perhaps you do live in London, who pays the council tax if you are living in a property with a whole bunch of other people? Now, in a lot of these situations, it is the owner of the property who is liable. So this is going to be in a property with multiple people. So for example, a house shared by multiple people who all have their own tenancy agreement and they are all individually paying rent. So what you see a lot in London, because house prices are so expensive and rent is very difficult to pay alone, a lot of the times you are going to enter into like a flat share. So the idea being is there's an owner of the property and then there's a bunch of you in the property. All of you will have your own tenancy agreement. You will have your own rent payments. You're all living in the same property, but you have your own individual contracts. Because that setup is quite confusing, you are not liable for the council tax as an individual, but the owner typically is. So it may be that when you sign a tenancy agreement for a flat share, definitely speak to the landlord or the letting agency about council tax, but it should be listed in the agreement. Perhaps it's included in your rent. So the owner would make payment on your behalf basically, but your rent kind of goes towards that. Whatever the case is, when you sign a tenancy agreement, just make sure to ask. If you are like me and you are living in a property, it's not a flat share, there's not a bunch of roommates, I am responsible and my partner is responsible. Now you can actually check to see if you can pay less council tax. Now you have to hit a certain criteria, but these are things like you have no income or low income, disabled, or you live alone. One thing I would definitely check is the live alone portion. If you live by yourself in a property, you can apply for a discounted council tax rate. One thing to keep in mind as an expat, there are a lot of restrictions on what type of help you can receive in the UK. On a bunch of the visas, certainly for all of the visas that I've had here in the UK, it specifically says I am not allowed public funds. So that means I'm not allowed any financial support from the UK. And sometimes this extends to things like trying to get a discount on council tax. So you might just have to check for yourself. I definitely would look into the single person's discount if you are living by yourself. It certainly helps. How often do you pay council tax? So this is actually kind of awkward because why not? Council tax is a yearly tax, but a lot of councils break it up into 10-month payments, which is really annoying and very awkward. Now, some councils are allowing people to change the payment schedule. So some councils will allow, 3 months, 6 months, maybe one lump sum, maybe spread over 12 months. But you will have to change that yourself. The default typically is payment across 10 months. So just make sure to either ask your council, call them up, or if you are registering online, there may be an option sort of in that online process to change the payment setup. And with that, how do you pay council tax? This is pretty much done online now. However, if you have any problems, always just call your council. It's better to ask them directly than to be confused. But for me, there's an online portal so I can sign in, I can see my council tax band, I can see my council tax information, and I can set up payment through that portal, typically through a direct debit. So what has been my experience with council tax? Well, as a Canadian, I had never heard of council tax before. Overall, it's pretty straightforward. In my situation, I have been living with my partner in a property. So we are both liable for the tax, both individually and yet also together. So typically, when you move into a new property, you will get that bill from the council. I have registered through an online portal. They send you all the details and then do payments through a direct debit. All of the properties I've been in have been different prices because there are also different sizes. So it's pretty straightforward. Just getting it set up at the beginning might be a little bit confusing, but then once it's set up, especially if you have a standing order or scheduled direct debit, then you don't really have to worry about it. If you have any questions or any problems, whether registering or with payment or any of that kind of stuff, don't be afraid to contact your council. They should have an email, but more than likely it's gonna be a phone number. Also, I always recommend checking out Citizens Advice. Again, link in the description. They are a charity here in the UK, but they provide unbelievable resources when it comes to anything about tax or legal stuff or renting or any of that kind of stuff. Check out Citizens Advice. They can be a great help. If you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. If you want to watch more, I would definitely recommend checking out this one where I talk about the cost of living in the UK, including council tax. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.